And clicked. All right, so we should be live now. Patrick, can you hear me, Patrick? Good. And here we go. Can you hear me, Patrick? You are on mute, Patrick. Your says the guest is in the green room. What? Patrick, you're on mute. Do you have a mute setting on your end that you can toggle there? Okay, I see what's going on. I'm just going to test something. So, Patrick, you should be able to... there we go. So now...
There we go.
Hold on.
Oh.
Hold on. Okay. So apparently, it will only hear you when you're on the scene.
I'm always on the scene.
Yeah. So when I go here, for instance... Oh, now you're still talking.
I think...
All right.
I think I was just closed out of the green room. You need to, like Johnny Carson or Conan O'Brien, you need to properly welcome the guests before they leave the green room.
All right. Well, let me send out the tweet.
Alrighty.
And let's get this party started. I gotta do that.
When should I be clearing my throat? When just at all times?
Never.
All right.
You clear your throat. I'm gonna send you this. You can edit the whole damn thing. How about that?
I need one good mute button.
All right. Here we go. Welcome to DevMode.fm, a podcast dedicated to the tools, techniques, and technologies used in modern web development. I'm Andrew Welch from NY Studio 107.
And I'm Patrick Harrington from Mildly Geeky in Boston.
Oh, we got to put you. There we go. Now you're on the right scene. There he is. The side by side. So what's going on, Patrick? We're doing another Dev Mode Stand-Up, which is where we're streaming live video. We
had great feedback on the first one. I thought it went well. So I figured we'd try it again.
I mean, given the way everything was thrown together, it's a miracle it worked as well as it did, right?
Yep, same goes for this one. I was running a little bit late, but this looks like it's working. Go to YouTube if you want the full unedited technical difficulties edition.
Oh, but that doesn't even cover the half of it. That's got to cover the before you connect part, right?
Stuck in the green room. I didn't get my red M&M, so I wasn't going to come out.
So I feel like we should update people. from the last time that we talked about a couple of things. So first of all, the one thing is you have now lived with your M1 MacBook Air for a little while.
I have.
You've guzzled the Kool-Aid. So tell us, how does it taste?
Yeah, I love it. It's funny. I think it was John Morton last time around was asking how it was it going, and I was a little bit lukewarm on it when it came to development. I've since completely given up Intel CPUs, and I'm living on the M1 all day. It's plugged in here. I kind of have it semi-docked. I don't have a good Thunderbolt 4 hub, which I'd like to eventually get because right now I'm not on hardwired internet, but I'm sure that's going to be fine for a video podcast. And just today, I put my old Mac Mini on eBay. I'm done with that computer. It's been working really well. Honestly, when you have Docker images, and this is going back to development specifically, when you have Docker images that are ARM64 compatible, it runs like lightning. A little bit of a letdown. One of my favorite Docker image providers, NY Studio 107 group, they're AMD only right now, so theirs kind of run less than fast. Those are the only ones that are running slowly. So Andrew, when are you gonna?
Let me see if I got this correct, Patrick. Let me see if I got this correct. So you are using my Docker setup, and you're using my scaffolding, and you're throwing shade at me. Okay,
massive shade. Yeah.
How about this? How about this for an answer? PRs are welcome, my man.
I don't think this is something I can PR. I don't think it's something I PR. So I've been digging into this, and it looks like you may need to do some sort of a CLI thing that tells Docker, hey, please go ahead and start offering up my stuff on ARM. There's something called BuildX that they have out there where you basically get to tell them, I want to run on AMD and ARM, essentially saying all of the things that I'm pulling in on Docker will run on these platforms, and they'll then go and try to generate those images for you.
Okay, I think you're talking about, is it BuildX, right? The thing is, the CLI thing is called? That's the thing that they're marking as experimental, right?
A little bit, yeah. It's all I can tell right now in terms of how to get it set up, but I desperately need you to make these run faster.
Well, I just want to make sure we're clear that you're giving me crap for something that I created, that you're leveraging, that's saving you tons of time, that is not doing what you want on a platform that I don't even use right now. Using an experimental functionality is what you're giving me.
And you are just glossing over the fact that I believe, your second GitHub sponsor, so I own a piece of this development.
If that really is how this goes, if that's really how this works, I'm gonna have to shut down that whole sponsorship thing. I'm just gonna have to end it right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but what does this do? What will making it? Assuming that I do this, which I'm not gonna do, honestly.
You will. You have to.
No, I'm not going to.
The M1 hordes are coming.
Whenever I get an M1 machine, then I will probably do it. But prior to that, don't bet on it. I have nothing to test it on. How would I even know if it works? Huh?
I'll do the testing for you. I mean, right now, essentially, I think all of it, and this gets further into how Docker runs on the Mac. It's essentially running a VM anyway, and then inside that VM, it's then running right now AMD code rather than ARM code, which would execute at a much higher speed.
Right.
It's interesting though. I have a few Docker setups that are doing the full build right in the Docker file, not using any pre-existing images aside from like the PHP 7.4 standard one. So a whole lot happens when you do your build. Those run. It feels like native. It feels like I'm running Valet. It's really neat.
Well, let me know. Tell me what is stopping you from being able to do this. Why am I the only one that can do it? I don't understand.
Well, if I forked your Docker images repo and set up my own hub.docker.com thingamajig, I guess I could then. I have to play around with it. But I think right now, if you navigate over to hub.docker.com/mystudio, you'll see that everything on yours is listed for AMD only.
I see.
Yeah.
So no changes would have to be made to the images. You're talking about something I got to do on my end when I build the image and then push it and tag it, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Nothing will change on GitHub in the Docker files themselves. More that you're saying, hey, here's a compiled for ARM version. I don't know if it goes into like the automated build setup or if it has to be done on the CLI. Haven't found that yet. This is all new stuff.
I mean, honestly, I'd be open to it. If you want to set up a time where you and I tuple together and try to get this working, I don't have a problem with that. It sounds relatively easy, you know?
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So M1, and the funny other thing is that since around the time of .all Montreal, I've been running on 2 computers, having what was the Mac Mini plugged in here all the time as my desktop unmoving computer. Oh, now we can see what's going on behind me in my office. I need to get a tighter crop. This works well on audio.
It looks like you're playing with blocks over there. What's going on back there?
No, the kids, it goes into the playroom.
Is that a cage? You keep your kids in a cage? Oh my God, I'm going to switch off this view real quick. All right.
Well, you can
still see the cage. All right, never mind.
Yeah, so it's funny. I was running on both a laptop and a desktop computer for a while, and it was always nagging me a little bit that when you're running like that, you always have in the back of your head, oh, did I, was that Docker container database up to date on one computer but not the other? You're switching all the time and never quite, getting into a state. With this little 13-inch MacBook Air is so light and easy. I can just unplug the 2 USB-C ports I have, bring it upstairs, and all of my windows are open. Everything's the way I want it. I'm also liking not kind of context switching between 2 computers, which isn't due to the M1, but maybe is due to the MacBook Air just being that much smaller and lighter compared to the old 16-inch I had. So, yeah, I put the Mac Mini up for sale today. We can put the eBay link in the show notes if anyone wants to buy it. Autograph and everything.
So you would say to anyone who's listening that is interested in using an M1 Mac, you would say to them that the time is now?
Yep. Yeah, very much so. I don't know if it's what they've done with Docker Desktop over the last couple of weeks, or just the fact that I've stopped using the NY Studio Docker images so much, but it's really nice.
It has nothing to do with it. You're so full of it.
It's pretty drastic. It's pretty drastic.
No, it doesn't. It's
very drastic.
What are you talking about in terms of the speed? Are you talking about the speed of the images because they're emulated on your machine, or what are you talking about?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So just loading the Craft dashboard takes maybe a quarter second on the ARM PHP build, and maybe 3 or 4 seconds, 5 seconds on the.
That's really slow, though.
That's really slow. When you're a state and you just say, and it could be faster.
No. What I'm saying is, like, when I'm loading the CP running Docker, it's under a second.
Exactly.
Like, super quick.
It is magnitude, slower on the non-optimized version. So
right.
Yeah, maybe for our third stand-up, we'll have the results of that.
Well, I mean, and that makes sense, right? So it's because of it has nothing to stop disparaging me. It has nothing to do with the fact that it's my images. It's that the images are not native is all that it is.
Yep.
For God's sake.
Yeah. What are you up to?
I forgot how to promote this thing. I'm trying to figure out. I want to see. Well, okay. So I'm going to answer just a question from Ben, real quick in chat. He's asking me what kind of camera am I using? And so this is a Blackmagic, some kind of fancy something or other kind of thing. That is kind of unreasonable for me to be using, given given that I don't make my living doing streaming stuff, but I am doing more of streaming with Ryan, and I don't know. It's kind of nice to have a setup that I can just turn on and I know it's going to work. Everything's all dialed in. I got my bokeh stuff going on, Yeah,
from what I understand, it's a little bit overkill, but I'm also a little jealous. I've got a 4K Logitech Brio, which I'm like, 4K, this will look terrific, but it doesn't have that nice smooth effect. And I mean, you've got lighting going on, you have makeup on to, yeah.
Well, and that's the, I could switch back and forth. I do have a Logitech 4K webcam, but there's no comparison. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just so much nicer. Yeah, it's a DSLR. So Matt Wilcox is saying, that it's not a webcam. And he's right. I mean, it's a DSLR, basically, is what it is. Yeah. But I don't know. It's nice because I've got a nice lens dialed in, so I get the bokeh, the blurred background effect, and I got it fixed right above my monitor here. So I just come in, I turn everything on, and everything just works. You know?
Yeah.
But
Another follow-up from last time. Yeah.
I am not going to get an M1 until they come out with the 15-inch MacBook Pro models. And I know you say I don't need it, but I want 64 gigs of RAM. And
I mean, I would rather have the RAM than not have it. It's interesting. I'm wondering if it's because it's essentially a system on a chip now, and the RAM is on package with the CPU and everything else.
Doesn't matter.
The storage is, but even when I see it using swap, I'm never actually feeling like you get to that place where you're like, oh man, why is everything churning? Why is there slowdown going on? There are times where I see that swap is getting used, but I've never felt it. Like it's one of those, if you're using swap and no one actually sees you using swap, did you ever use it on an M1?
Yeah. If you are swapping, you will notice, and it will be a massive difference.
I haven't. I have swapped. These M1s are really impressive.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying. I'm not saying you are. I'm saying if you start doing stuff, and the way that I work, I think is we determine is very different from you. Like I've got like a half dozen or more PHP Storm windows open. I've got like a ridiculous number of tabs that are going on. It's not going to matter that the RAM is on chip or not. You only have so much RAM, and when it's out of RAM, it swaps, and it swaps to the VM. It swaps to the SSD.
Right. Right now, I'm using 4.2 gigabytes of swap, which I know is just terrifying to you, but everything is running without issue, without slowdown. I'm driving this 5120 by 1440 monitor at 120 hertz. Yeah. This computer is ridiculous.
Well, swap is a little bit misunderstood. So a swap out is not that big of a deal. It's not that costly. So basically what happens when you swap out is the system says, okay, I need more RAM, and then it finds some blocks that haven't been used for a while, and it swaps those out. A swap in is actually very costly because the system needs that RAM now, and everything blocks until it can read that RAM in from disk and do something with it. So it's a little bit tricky to read and figure out exactly what you're running into, but if you start to see lots of page ins, that's when I would start to say, okay, we're probably swapping. And again, it's fine. Like, obviously all these computer manufacturers, they make different computers because people work differently. All right. It's totally fine that you work differently than me. It's not a big deal. I'm just saying for me personally, I need more than 16 gigs. I know myself. I'm a slob. Stuff is everywhere. Okay. I'm not gonna close every app that I'm not running. Yeah. It actually blows my mind because we were talking to people in Discord, I think, and there are some people that actually turn their computers off at night, like shut them down. And I'm like, what? Like, who does that?
Once every couple months, maybe I'll shut it down if it has to run an update or something, but never.
Yeah. I don't even do that, man. Like my desktop computer, I've got the power saving settings and all that kind of stuff. I just walk away. And my laptop computer, I just shut the lid. Like I literally never ever shut those computers down. And I don't understand people that I don't get it. Like I don't get the argument for doing that, Yep. You take so long getting everything set up and open the way you want it to. Any power savings you get would be so tiny, or you probably don't even get any savings because everything's got to reboot, everything's got to get recached. Like it's just brutal.
Yep.
All right.
Let's see what else.
Ben says he restarts his computer twice a week. Why? Why, Ben? Why? Tell us why.
So interestingly, I reformat my Mac maybe twice a year. Have we talked about this?
Why?
You get a new kit. You need that. Imagine if with your car, you could get that new car smell back. Twice a year, you could just go through a half day's worth of discomfort and have it be freshly detailed, new car smell right off the lot fresh. That's why. I can literally, I have it scripted to this point where I have an entire homebrew setup where it'll go and install every app I need. I have things that are copied over onto my home Synology server so I can sync back down all my SSH keys and repos and whatnot. Like twice a year, I like to nuke my Mac.
This just sounds horrible to me.
It's terrific. It makes you just reassess what applications you really need installed. If there's weird things that have happened in Keychain or wherever else, it just clears that out. It stinks for about a day and a half, maybe.
Okay, so here's what it is, Patrick. You're the dude that takes his Trans Am out and he brings it outside and he waxes it by hand. You know, a couple times a year, you pull that Trans Am out. You're out there, you're buffing it, you're waxing it, and you pull it back in. Me, I just get in my car and I drive it places. Like literally, I do nothing. If I go,
but you've got French fry wrappers over here. You've got the kids' drinks and rattle around in the back.
No.
You need to clear that stuff out. You need to clear that out.
No. I keep my car clean, man. I keep it clean. But I'm saying that, in other words, I'm not like, I don't know. It's weird because I've been so into computers for so long, but I'm more utilitarian about it. I'm like, okay, I want this thing to work for me, and anything like made to work like that just sounds terrible. Like the idea of reformatting it twice a year sounds like I would rather kill myself than do that. I would take up another profession.
I will say, since I've gotten into Docker now, it's probably less needed than it used to be when I used to have Valet and weird installs of PHP going on all over the place.
That's because you're using the wrong tool, though.
Well, it was. Now it's all in Docker, and I can just nuke the whole thing, do a volume prune, system prune, and it's all cleaned up. Yeah.
Well, and again, that is the striking difference between Dockerizing stuff, where you containerize everything, and kind of just installing it locally. And I get the reasons for installing stuff locally. It's the promise of getting things up and running quickly, but it's always costed me way more time to do stuff that way. And I'm not going to get into like forcing people to use Docker, because it is a big ask to learn it and to get up to speed with it. But once you do, man, it's just so much nicer. You just don't have to worry about all the crap. You don't have to have scripts installed. You don't have to reformat your computer twice a year or do all the other crazy stuff, Yeah,
especially Docker Compose, just having that one file, one command, it's up and running. It's been a big game changer for me.
Yeah, and Mark is saying that he only reboots when stuff doesn't work. And yeah, that's the same with me. Like, I reboot when I'm forced to. And I get angry. Like, I'll install some software and it'll install a kernel extension or something, and it will say you have to reboot. And I know for a fact that you don't have to, because you can dynamically load and unload kernel extensions. So a lot of times I actually just force kill the installer, and I manually dynamically load the kernel extension. I try not to reboot. Like, I go out of my way, Do
you have a record for how long you've kept something up for? Months, year?
No, I don't even bother with that, because the problem with that is you do get software updates, and they've gotten really good about annoying me to the point where I'm like, fine, you want me to update? I will update, okay? Fine, But that's really the only time I reboot is when I update,
Yeah.
So you would recommend it. Now, what is your reasoning for not waiting for a 15-inch? Did you actually want a lighter form factor?
In a perfect world, I would have it could have done a what do they have? They have a 13-inch MacBook Pro, but it had the touch bar, and I have no interest in getting another touch bar Mac. I could have, I always go back and forth between 13 and 15, or now 16. Now I'm back on 13. I'm pretty happy with it. It's my first Air, and it's just super light. So I think it's pretty nice. Like, you hold it in your hand, and you honestly don't feel like you're holding a computer. My only complaint is that I wish there were 2 more of the Thunderbolt or even USB-C ports on the side of it. There are only 2, and I need to figure that out at some point so that I can get everything plugged in that I want plugged in.
Now, is the reason why you ended up going with this thing, is it because you're becoming an executive and you don't really code anymore? You're becoming a CTO?
No, I'm coding way more on this thing than I probably was in the weeks prior. And part of that's because I'm not switching computers all the time. No, that's completely uncalled for. No, it's a terrific computer. I don't need the bigger screen. I'm not as large a person as you. No, it's a great. My only downfall of it, or the only downside, is really I wish there were a couple more ports on it. Yeah, I mean, basically, my Intel one was rapidly depreciating in value. If you watched, where you can sell computers, I use SwapUp quite a bit, kind of like eBay but nicer. Same thing with my Mac Mini. That's kind of dropping in value. And now that I've just had it unplugged for the last week and a half, I said, okay, I clearly don't need this computer anymore. Let me sell it.
All right. Well, fair enough. Anyway, that's enough on the M1 Macs. They sound awesome. I mean,
they're really nice. Yeah.
Part of me is just, as someone who's been through so many Apple processor transitions, I'm just like, oh, for God's sake, like another one, really? Are we doing this again?
It's impressive, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is going to be it for a very long time, and I think it'll be M1X or M2 or whatever. But
yeah,
clearly they're interested in owning more and more of the hardware stack, and yeah, it's smart.
Well, so let's get talking about something else that you and I were kind of chatting about. So you sent me a message, and you were all excited about some rumor about an Apple car, right?
Yeah. I mean, you have a Tesla, so I know you're big on the electric cars. This one, I'm trying to remember exactly what they were talking about. I know they were saying that Hyundai would be the manufacturer. This came out just yesterday. Someone who's a securities analyst had some sort of a heads up on it. They were saying 310 mile range, I think 160 mile per hour top speed. Granted, this is all some deep rumor about something that's years away. But yeah, we were talking more that it's not just figuring out how to make the car and all that, but doing it at scale and getting the logistics right, and the things that Tesla struggled for years with, and I think still struggles in some ways. People talk about their inconsistent gaps in the space between panels and whatnot on the exterior. But the thought there is that Apple would have a problem there, kind of doing everything that comes with that. I'm less concerned about it.
I'm a little concerned about it. So, as you mentioned, I've got a Tesla. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I've only had it like 6 months. It's probably the most practical car that I've ever owned because there is an incredible amount of storage space in it, because there's a lot of crap that you just don't have, right?
Yep.
So there's storage up front, there's storage in the back. I don't really go that far most of the time. I'm just like putzing around town doing this, that, or the other thing. And it's fantastic for that. The reason why I'm a little bit skeptical about the Apple car is just how much lead time that Tesla has had building the technology and the infrastructure. And then you look at like electric cars are inevitable. Okay, whether it's a Tesla or some other brand, like everyone's going to be driving them at some point soon. But even the big manufacturers that have a whole lot of experience and a whole lot of money have put out some really underwhelming electric cars. There's some hybrid cars that are not bad, but the electric only cars that I've seen from other manufacturers have really just not been great.
And you have in mind, my wife has the e-Golf. It's the Volkswagen, essentially it's the Volkswagen Golf. People have called it a compliance car. They basically made it because well, no, it sounds
they made
like
it because
really
they got caught cheating on the testing.
No,
make it.
Not quite. No, that's a whole other issue with them. It's because to sell in California, if I remember correctly, you have to have like some model be electric. I think that's the story behind compliance cars. And so some of them went and they have like the Chevy Bolt or whatever it might be, like a full engineered from the ground up to be electric car. And some of them said, okay, can we just like almost like the M1 Mac, some of these models, there were no hardware changes except that the CPU is different. And in these cars, they basically said, okay, let's just take out the gasoline engine, let's put in an electric engine. Obviously, the dashboard changes a little bit for some of that, but it is in every essence a Golf, aside from the fact that it's running as an electric car. They didn't come up with a new model to say here's our electric entry. They basically reworked an existing model. We test drove a Chevy Bolt, and it's a weird car. Like I almost feel like they think that anyone who's into an electric car is going to want a quirky, funny, look at me, I drive electric type vehicle. But most people want to look good when they're in their car. They want it to perform well, but they don't want people to look at them like, oh, you're driving that BMW i Series or whatever that thing was. That's where I think Tesla's done well. Tesla's, they're gorgeous cars as well as really well engineered electric vehicles, but they also just look like great vehicles, period.
Right. You want a car that happens to be electric. You don't want like some crazy device that they're trying to make look all cyborg and cool and kind of stuff, right? I mean, who cares, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
But okay, so specifically regarding Apple, though, I mean, I just think that Apple, I know they're rumored to be partnering with Hyundai and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if it's more that, are they actually going to produce an Apple branded car, or are they going to be kind of taking CarPlay to the point where it's going to, you know, be the operating system of the car that they then license out to other people, or
I hope
what
not.
their
As much as I love CarPlay, I don't know. Yeah, having everything be a giant touch pound thing might be a little bit weird.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, is their end game to make their own iCar, or is it to make the operating system and software that runs on them, or what do you think? What do you think their end game there is?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you remember like the Motorola Rocker, the iTunes enabled Motorola flip phone back in 2005 or something, a little bit before. Did you have one?
No.
Oh, okay. I don't think this is going to be like this, where they're just like, hey, you know, put a little bit of our software in as the infotainment kind of takeover. But Hyundai still gets to sell like, you know, the Hyundai iCar or the Hyundai Apple. I feel like they're going to want to really own it and say, this is the Apple car, you know, come see it at your nearest Hyundai dealership or something. Who knows? Maybe they'll, you know, Hyundai has the Genesis brand, which is kind of, Hyundai is to Genesis as Toyota is to Lexus. Maybe they'll do something like that where it's its own brand behind the scenes. Hyundai's factories and plants are the ones rolling them off the line, but it is its own brand. Yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine they're going to start an entire car not dealership, but entire logistics and manufacturing for something right off the bat, but maybe they would. This does seem like a good way for them to get into the market with someone that already has dealerships everywhere, plants everywhere. But they're Apple, so they can kind of say, and here are, if you want to be the one that's making a good amount of money on every car that goes off the lot, here's how it's going to be.
And you made an interesting point to me, which is that people also kind of didn't give Apple any credit that they were going to be able to come in and just start selling phones, for instance, because, you know, there was a quote from the CEO of BlackBerry or something. So you can't just come in here and start making phones. We've been making
guys
phones
are not
going to
just figure this out. They're not just going to walk in and Steve Ballmer way back had his whole thing just laughing about the iPhone, saying it's $600 and it doesn't have a keyboard.
Zune, biatch, Zune. Okay.
I wanted the brown Zune back in the day. I like that thing.
No, but I understand what you're saying in terms of they have a history of being able to go into another market and do something with it. Although I would say that the phone market is more of a lateral move than a car would be. From like, because I mean, it's just a mobile computer in a lot of ways, you know, not to downplay any of the innovation or stuff that they did there, but lest you forget, like you seem very bullish on Apple's ability to produce this iCar that's going to be this just awesome thing. Lest you forget, Patrick, do you remember what the Pippin was?
I don't remember the Pippin. I remember the iPod Hi-Fi. What is the Pippin?
Apple Pippin was their play to take over the gaming world. It was a console. And I remember it well because they were pitching at us to develop for this thing. And it was just a massive failure. It went absolutely nowhere. Nothing happened with it. That's probably why you don't know about it. They probably did that.
I'm looking at this now. It kind of looks like the Dreamcast.
A little bit.
With like a PS5-like controller.
But it was their bid to get into the console market. And
it was 1996. Non-Steve Jobs years don't count.
And they pushed it really, really hard. And I hate to say it, but this is a non-Steve Jobs year, just so you know.
Yeah, but he's spiritual successor. We're still in the post-Jobs era is not anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, I know all about the Pippin. That was a massive failure. Okay.
Was it a massive failure, or is it because you were so close to the Apple? Because I guarantee, if you stop 100 people on the street and say, "What do you think of the Apple Pippin?" they would say, "What the hell are you talking about?" But if you ask them about the Sega Saturn or something like that, they're like, "Oh yeah, that was that system that didn't sell." Like, clearly couldn't have been that much of a failure if it never, like if the rocket never got off the launch pad. I mean, yes, it failed, but it also never even tried to take off.
No. What happened is hundreds of millions of dollars were sunk into the rocket, and a whole bunch of people were let on board, and the rocket exploded on the launch pad and blew everyone up, is what happened.
In May 2006, the Pippin was listed 22nd in PC World's list of the 25 worst tech products of all time.
Well, okay, and let's do another one. Let's see how good your Apple memory is. Do you remember the Apple Newton? I
do remember the Newton. It was amazing before its time.
I mean, it was before its time, but it also...
Handwriting recognition just finally came to the iPad in the last year. The Newton was way ahead of that.
If something fundamentally doesn't work, I don't think you can say it's ahead of its time. Did you ever write with one of those things?
No. I
have you ever been?
I use the yeah.
Have you ever been frustrated correcting Siri when Siri gets some words wrong?
Quite a bit, yeah.
Imagine that times about 100 when you're trying to write.
I had a Palm Pilot back in the day with the Stent. I can't remember. They had their own name for their typographical language for the Palm. I can't remember what it was called.
Oh, like it was like cuneiform or hieroglyphs or something like that. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
They actually wanted you to write in. They were essentially developing a new alphabet, and they wanted you to write using it.
Graffiti.
Graffiti. That's it.
Graffiti. I knew all the letters for graffiti. Yep.
And I think they ended up bringing graffiti over to the Newton at one point before it ended up dying a horrible death. Yep. Anyway, my point is, Apple has had their share of spectacular failures that people want to forget in markets that are a lot less ambitious than entering the car market. That's why I'm a little skeptical about it.
Yeah, 15 plus years though. I mean, I don't think they've had a real whopper like that in a while.
Do you remember?
HomePod has been pretty middling. I have the HomePod and HomePod Mini because I'm an Apple devotee.
Do you remember the Apple Hi-Fi?
Yes, yeah, that was, or the socks for the iPods. But I remember the Hi-Fi.
I'm actually friends with the person that was the product manager for the Hi-Fi.
For the socks? For the Hi-Fi.
Hi-Fi. I'm sorry, Cassie. I think she's moved on to other stuff now, though.
Funny.
Anyway, so this comes out. The Apple Car comes out day one. You're just going to hop on and buy it the way you did the M1?
It depends. I mean, that's a big purchase, and that's the other thing is that it's not something you buy every year. I mean, maybe they'll have a leasing program that does make people go in and out. I'd strongly consider it. I mean, I bought a minivan because I drive a minivan now. A couple of years ago, so I'm not due for at least a few years, which that would time up pretty well with this is saying 2025 is when it's going to come out. It's a possibility. It depends, but I'd probably want a bigger vehicle than a small sedan, which is my guess as to what it would be.
Because even the leaked specs that were on that, I mean, it's probably fine for the type of people that are going to want something like that. It's probably fine. The 300-mile range is probably fine. That's what the range is on mine. It's like a 310-mile range, something like that.
Yeah,
it's totally fine, for the majority of stuff that I do. But like Tesla, they just released the Model S Plaid Plus or something. 520 miles, man.
That's a lot.
520
What's the Plaid
miles.
thing? What is the Plaid thing? Isn't that a joke at this point? I was reading something about the whole Plaid thing.
No, it's sort of like their S line. You know what I mean? In other words, it's like their enhanced whatever. But all I'm saying is if they're doing that now, where are they going to be in 4 years? You know what I mean? Elon
Musk, it just worries me. I don't know, something about that. That guy worries me a lot.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but you're buying the car. You're not buying the person. There are plenty of CEOs that if you met them in person, you'd be like, oh, this person's a dick. But that doesn't mean that their product's not going to be a good thing.
I guess
I knew people that worked directly for Steve Jobs, and I'm not disparaging people that are no longer with us, but they thought he was an asshole.
Oh, sure. And he got results, so yeah.
And part of that may be personality conflicts and all that kind of stuff. Well, all I'm saying is I could say the same thing. Well, you may not like Elon, but he gets results.
Yeah.
So
some securities fraud. Yeah. We have Matt Wilcox in the chat. Apple hasn't been able to build a laptop keyboard worth a damn for 5 years. I'm interested if he's including the kind of everything they've done in the last year. I mean, those I feel like are finally getting back to where they should have been. I don't know if it's just a logistics thing where it takes them that long to make a big hardware change like the keyboards, or if they just kept on thinking, oh, we've got to fix this time, we've got it fixed. It's funny, on an episode of Accidental Tech Podcast, the thing that's really infuriating is now that they brought back the old keyboards, they didn't have to make the laptops thicker to do it. The laptops are still just as thin as they've always been. And that was kind of the argument is, well, we want them thinner, so we make these, low travel keyboards that also, if they get a speck of dust in them, they freeze up.
I still remember Schiller up on stage after the touch bar had been introduced and after the butterfly keyboard had been introduced, like at the next, like the 6 months or, whatever. And he was gushing about how wonderful the touch bar was and how wonderful the butterfly keyboard stuff was. And I'm like, yeah, right. Yeah, okay, Steve. Right.
Yeah.
They were garbage, and I'm surprised that I think there were class action lawsuits against them for that, weren't there?
About the keyboards, yeah. They now have a massive recall where, and actually I had a keyboard that wasn't one of the bad ones, but I was able to get it replaced just because I think there's such a stigma right now with the keyboards that you say one thing about the keyboards and you get a new logic board and replacement on your computer.
Really? So that's the magic keyword that I should be using?
My daughter got honey on my keyboard, and yeah, the key's just stuck because honey, and it wasn't even one of the bad keyboards, it was one of the good keyboards, but honey, they're still not honey proof. And so I'm like, I just got this computer and I didn't mention the honey, and yeah, they replaced the entire top board or whatever it is.
Well, my only other point about the Apple car is, and this is the case with any other car really, is that the infrastructure counts maybe as much as the car does in terms of, if you're going to go on a trip somewhere, are you going to be able to charge this thing, charge it quickly, and find places where you can charge it? And that is one thing that Tesla has done an amazing job with. There are supercharging stations all over the place. And VW, the company that you've got your compliance car, as part of their settlement for the test cheating stuff that they did, they actually had to build some of the infrastructure in the United States. They had to put in a whole lot of the little electric charging stations, but there still aren't that many of them, and they just don't charge nearly as quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I have to think, and even though VW maybe had to help with that, if Tesla could figure out a way to get that financed for all these superchargers, then Apple has more money than they know what to do with. They could throw money at that problem and start, putting into strategic places, supercharger type setups. That being said, man, if every car has their own proprietary charging port, and people have drawn, the giant lightning port going into the side of the Apple car, I really hope that when it comes to supercharging or whatnot, that there's some sort of a standard that'll emerge so that you don't have to, find the one that works for your model car.
Well, that's one thing that I really like that they do in the EU, is that every phone that is sold has to work with a USB-C charger. Has to. And so what Apple has to do, for instance, because they ship with the Lightning connectors, is they have to ship an adapter with it in order to be compliant.
It's funny.
I mean, I guess to get around that, they're probably just not going to have any kind of a what are they? So they're going to get rid of the charging port altogether or something and do all wireless charging, which
I don't know. I mean, even the Apple Watch has like a tiny little charging port hidden behind the strap. Or no, it's not a charging port, but a diagnostics port. I feel like there has to be some way of connecting to something if the wireless goes. And that being said, I've been doing almost entirely Qi charging now for a while, and it is much nicer.
Well, all right. So let's talk tech for a little bit in terms of stuff that we've been working on. So what kind of projects have you been working on lately in your daily mildly geeky grind? What have you been doing?
A couple things. I have that Nux site is just about to launch actually this Sunday. We're doing a launch on Sunday morning, so that's going to be working. Had to try to work with Azure pipelines to be able to get that to work. You and I were talking about the little bit offline. Man, I really appreciate Buddy. We both use buddy.works as the domain for doing continuous integration. Really makes you appreciate how nice the user experience is there on Buddy when you've had to use GitHub Actions is okay, but Azure Pipelines is real tough.
GitHub Actions I have approached a number of times.
Yep.
And I start reading the docs and I start looking at a couple examples, and then I just am like, nah, and I just close the window because, like, I already have it all working with Buddy, and I really like my setup. Probably at some point in the future, I may do something with it in terms of trying to port it over to GitHub Actions. I know it's possible. I know Matt Stein, and there are some other people that have done similar things, and nothing against them. It's more against the UX. It just really is not that fun to put them together. How have you found? Have you done much of any substance with GitHub Actions?
No, I played with it for a while. I think basic stuff I could get going, but especially with PHP stack and all that, there's just too much that I needed to do that it seemed like was outside of what they could or would do out of the box. So I haven't gotten too far into it. Azure, to its credit, I could basically do almost everything I wanted. The only thing I haven't figured, no, I mean, I'm doing like full atomic deployments. Basically, you have a whole pipeline that can run Composer and all that. You have to kind of use their weird YAML setup to instruct it on how to do everything. It generates an artifact, which is a zip file of your build. And then I have it doing an SSH copy of that out to the server and doing a SSH command. So I've got all that running. The only big thing that I haven't been able to get going is to trigger all that off of a webhook. With something like Nuxt, we want to be able to kick off a new static site build whenever someone makes an update to the site. I haven't yet found any way to trigger a pipeline off of something that's not planned. That's the only place. But yeah, the developer experience and ease of getting it up and running is just light years behind what Buddy is.
Well, was that a client requirement? Is that why you're using Azure? I would imagine it must be, right? You wouldn't just pick that.
No, I mean, so all of their infrastructure is on Azure.
Okay.
In staging, I've been running it on Buddy because it's what I know and works. But if someday we part ways, if we're not working together, I don't want to have to worry, oh my gosh, this entire bank's website can't build without my one little Buddy account intact. So for me, it's about lessening my risk and their risk. To try to get it all into stuff that they own and have the keys to. So, yeah, if anyone out there is listening to this and knows how to get an Azure pipeline to fire off of a webhook, please hit me up, because then the docs are so dense. There's not a lot of people trying to do static site generator off of a webhook on Azure pipelines.
I can't imagine, Patrick.
The Windows world is a different place.
Is this the site that we were talking about? So you were, and if there are certain things you can't go into, that's fine. But there was one site that we were talking about that you were working on, that you were telling me that you were making it a static site, which sounds wonderful, but then you were deploying it to a server that's running Nginx. Like, what? Why?
Well, again, doing anything in Azure is gross, and they have their own CDN setup, but you spend time in there, you're like, oh god, this is going to be awful. Getting the site into their blob storage for static deployment,
No, I don't mean that. I mean, why not just deploy it to Vercel or deploy it to Netlify or something like that? Is that a client requirement again?
It's not quite a client requirement as much as at times when you are working with a client's IT team and you start to get really realistic about what you're going to be able to get done and can't get done. And maybe there are some things you just don't try to get done because it's just going to be too much. Yes, I'd love to be able to put it up on Netlify or whatever. That would be a heck of a lot nicer. But then there's just a whole lot of red tape to cut through. So for now, we're basically just building it out to a little, an Azure VM running Nginx because, it's a static site.
Because even with the stuff you would need to learn, in terms of learning how to use, how to deploy to Vercel or learning how to deploy to Netlify, you would still save a whole lot of time
Yeah,
over
and
doing this. Yeah.
if there was no red tape, that's exactly what I'd be
Yeah,
doing. It's
that makes
more
sense.
of, I'm not the one that's making that decision and
Yeah.
has to make the case for here's why Netlify is safe and here's the technology landscape I've done of them versus other ones and why can't we do all this in Azure. And so right now I'm choosing to get it done.
We had a similar thing where the the client was just like, well, you have a choice. You can do it on our .NET server farm, or you can do it on on Heroku, and those are the
Yep.
only two that are approved. And you pick. So we went with Heroku.
Yeah. Yep.
Because I at least have some familiarity with that, and it ended up
Yeah.
working out fine. But I get it. I mean, the one thing is, it would solve that redirect problem that you were talking about with me last time, where you in Netlify and I believe Vercel as well, they've got a UX where you can just enter in whatever redirects you want right in there,
Mhm.
and you're good to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we talked about it in the last one, but yeah, essentially I'm proxying on the Nginx side. If we can't find a URL, we send it over to Craft so that Retour, your redirect plugin, can do its thing to try to say, is this a redirect I know about? Yeah, I mean, it was like 3 lines of Nginx config to basically say, hey, if the static file isn't there, send it over to Craft just like you would a non-static site. So worked pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I've been just doing mostly some support and minor updates for my plugins. And I've also, I keep talking about this Webpack 5 config, and I just need to get off my ass and write the damn article,
Well, yeah, and you released something new into the world yesterday, maybe the get-webpack-config. What's that?
So one of the big things I think that I learned from doing that initial Webpack 4 config was that dividing things up in terms of common, development, and production was probably not the best way to break things up. And the reason why I kind of came to that conclusion is that, yes, it does simplify some things, but you end up being kind of unclear about, well, where is this thing? Where does it live? Like, I need to edit something with post CSS. Is it in development? Is it in common? Is it in product? Like, where is the config for this thing? And then the other thing is, even projects that start out small and start out simple, they almost never end up that way. And while I felt that was an improvement over just one massive config file with conditionals everywhere, I came to realize that it just wasn't great, in terms of maintenance. And that's fine. We talked about it many times, that a lot of times you build stuff and then you figure out how to build it right? So at least for now, I came up with a way of modularizing everything. So instead of separating things by development or production or common, it's separated by function, right? So here, so all of the stuff related to Vue is over here in this one config. All of the stuff related to post CSS is here in this other config. Here's your development config. Here's your production config. And you'll end up, like on your average project, you'll probably end up with about a dozen configs that you use. And the thing about Webpack, so a lot of people use Laravel Mix because it's, it's like this easier way to do it, right? All that Laravel Mix is a programmer interface for generating Webpack configs. Because I've looked at their code, I see what they're doing under the hood. They have this chaining syntax, and they end up translating that into a Webpack config, into an actual Webpack configuration object, and then they just pass it to Webpack. That's what happens.
Code to write config,
Well, which is fine. Like, I'm not dissing it at all. It's basically, it's simplifying what you have to do to build a Webpack config, which is great. There's no diss to that at all. But if what you're doing in the end is just writing a Webpack config, it didn't seem so bad to me if we could break things up into these modular little pieces to just write Webpack configs. So the basic premise is that each one of these configs is a fully functioning Webpack config. It's a Webpack configuration object. Like, that's what it is, okay? And the routine you're talking about, the get-webpack-config, is some syntactic sugar, some functions that just make your config files look a lot cleaner. Because what it does is you can just, it takes all of these little configs and it combines them together into one config, and then it passes that to Webpack, right? So if you can think about, like, I've got my Vue Webpack config over here, I've got my post CSS Webpack config over here, all these little pieces, and it uses a core plugin called Webpack Merge, which does a deep merge, and it merges it together, and then you end up with a final config. Any one of these things on their own is a valid config, and you can use it. But then you mash them all together, and the nice thing about it is that if you need to fix something that is related to CSS, you know where to go. There's one config, and you have only the stuff that deals with CSS there. The other nice thing about it is you can just, to remove let's say I don't want to use Vue anymore on this project. I want to use React. Okay. If you had one big Webpack config to then go and remove all the little places where Vue was in that config, it's like all over the place. It's like trying to get rid of mold, With the modular setup, you just delete one line. You delete one line that says include this config, and then you're done. So that's what this little package that I published is. Originally I had it as a helper function that was built into the boilerplate that I shipped. And then Tim Kelty was just like, actually, I think it was on here. It was on one of these live streams, I think, that he was complaining about. He's like, yeah, I don't really want to have any code mixed in. You should make that a package that you can then use instead of having the code built in. And my response to him was, well, yeah, but, anything in .js is code, right? Like your webpack.dev.js is code. But I thought about it, and I thought about it. And he was right. He was right.
Usual Tim was right. Yep.
Yeah. So I ended up refactoring. I'm not going to go that far. I'm not going to go that far, Tim. That Tim is usually right. Tim, I hope you're listening so you hear this diss. I'm not going to go that far. But he was definitely right about this, that it was nice to refactor it out into a package. So now it just requires a package, and then anyone can use it anywhere they want, and then there's no code that is in there. So I released that on NPM. I don't expect many people to look at that until the full Webpack config, and actually the repo for my Webpack config is out and done, and it's been there for a long time. The only thing that I haven't done is the actual write-up. So I need some motivation, Patrick.
I don't know what to tell you, man. We all need another 5-minute read. How long did it take you to write the first annotated guide to Webpack 4?
I don't know, and I don't really want to know. That was not born in a day. This new one, it should in theory take less time to write because there's less there. And honestly, like, the biggest takeaway that I want people to get from it is that even if you're working on a small project, start with a modularized approach. So that you can use the same approach on every project, and so that it's easy to scale these things up or down as you need to add or remove stuff to it. And I think that's the most important part. The fact that I got everything working on Webpack 5, that's just like tweaking config and making, what did they change, what did they break, and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I would imagine I could probably get it done in a week. And that's not writing it full time for that week. That's doing other stuff. But I did, I knew I kind of wanted to get this package done and out, so I did that, and I got that out and done and published it. So that's one excuse that's out of the way, so I can't use that anymore. But I've been working on that, and I've been working on that update to image optimize that we'll spend some time on some other time. But that is going to be fantastic for people. I've got a huge response to people looking at the way that I've got it automatically computing the sizes and the source set and stuff for you, because it is a giant pain in the ass, even for someone like me that's been doing it for a long time. To work your way backwards and figure out how all these images should be done. So I've been doing that too, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I've been doing a decent bit of developer training too, which I've been enjoying.
Okay, that does sound cool. What else we got going? Maelstrom is back in the news.
Yeah. So this is in my former life. This is a game that I wrote while I was in college, actually. and the majority of it is in 68K assembler. That's how old we're talking. That's like a long time ago.
Yeah, really.
And in part, I remember I was motivated to write it because there was some guy on some Usenet forum was saying that Macs were too slow to do the full color animation thing. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to prove someone on the internet wrong. So yeah, I went out and I built it. The majority of it was in 68K assembler, and it was a lot of fun. It was super popular. You know, now it looks like a joke, but it was really popular back in the day. And the fun thing about it is I was approached by a guy named Sam Latinga. And he said, hey, you know, I love this game. I want to use it for my master's thesis. I'm working on this thing called SDL, Simple Direct Media Layer, which is his way. He wanted like a cross-platform way to write a game. So you could run it on Mac, on Windows, on Linux, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, like, I don't mind you doing it. Like, that's fine, but it's all in assembler. Are you sure you want to do this? Yeah. He's like, yeah, okay, you know, I'll do it anyway. So I just dumped him the code, and it ended up being his college or his PhD thesis, and he released it under SDL, and it's out there. And he just updated it so that it will work on modern Macs. Like 18 years, he said, after the last release or the initial release or whatever, he updated it so that it will work on modern Macs now, as well as Linux and Windows, and I think there are a couple other weird OSs that it runs on too. So it's pretty wild, pretty fun.
That's crazy. Yeah, very cool.
And I think he worked at Blizzard for a really long time. He may still work there. I don't know.
Have your kids played Maelstrom?
I think I got them. I know they looked at videos of it, and I want to say that someone had a version of it that ran, because it's open source. Like I open sourced the whole thing a long time ago. I want to say that they played a version on an iPad. I want to say, I don't know.
Okay.
But I did send it to the link to my kid, and I was just like, hey, you should download it and run this. And he's just like, you know, maybe you should rewrite this yourself using modern technology.
It's funny.
I think I said maybe someday or something like that, you know?
Yeah. I went to school with a guy, his dad, you remember the game Choplifter?
Oh,
remember that one?
I love that game.
Yeah, I went to school with a guy, his father was the one that did that. Yeah, that was a cool game. That was, it was like his entire claim to fame. I don't know, he would like bring it out at parties, like, oh, my dad did Choplifter. It never really worked, but it was a sweet game.
What was he hoping to gain by bringing that?
I don't know. We were indoor kids. That was all we had.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to educate my kids now and be like, look, if you are ever at a party and you think about like mentioning this about your dad, like, don't.
My dad made SEO-matic.
No. Don't. No.
Anything else you're working on?
There probably is, and I'm probably forgetting. But that's all right. We're going for about an hour. I mean, I think we can say that about wraps it up for another episode of the devmode.fm podcast. To have every episode sent to your favorite podcast player. I'm doing this from memory, Patrick. Like, subscribe, share with a friend, spam people, do something, right?
Or check us on YouTube. This very episode was broadcast live on YouTube. Keep an eye on the Twitter feed. We'll announce when they are, and if you want, throw it up. It's a good time.
Yeah, and we're still getting our feet wet with the whole YouTube thing, but it seems to be working all right. And one of my favorite things, honestly, is when people are watching it and they ask questions live. You know, that's one of my favorite things. Oh my God, we got the master. We got Ryan Ireland is in here watching the stream.
He's looking at my camera, wondering if I have jaundice. I need a new camera.
I can give you a shopping list if you want.
I might, yeah.
Mark says, great background noise. That is what I aspire to be, is background noise.
I'm showing up my space heater. Hopefully. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to stop the recording now. And and we are going off air.
Cool.
And I guess I have to hit end broadcast too.